All right, so I'm Casey with Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Ambassador Real Estate. We're going to be covering veterans benefits, the home buying process. And then this is Wyatt with Veterans United. I'll give him a chance to introduce himself.
I'm Wyatt. I've been a loan officer for coming up on 2 years. I specialize in VA loans. However, we also do conventional and FHA for folks, civilian folks as well. I got started off in the lending after I had such a great experience buying my own home 2 years ago. So I have really enjoyed this topic, and I really enjoy helping people every day. So thanks, Casey, for inviting me to co-host this with you and help other people.
Yep, so I'm going to give a little bit of background on myself. So like I said, my name is Casey. I did 7 years active duty Air Force. I started out as a crew chief working on the C-130s, stationed out at Davis-Monthan. Hold on a second, we got somebody joining. Hey, Dawn. Can you hear us all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi.
Perfect. We're just going through introducing ourselves. My name is Casey. This is Wyatt. He's a loan officer with Veterans United. I was kind of talking about my background a little bit. I did 7 years active duty, PCS multiple times with my family. Was able to go through and have some pretty good experience. I got involved in being a real estate agent because I just had bad experiences. So for the opposite, so Wyatt got started because he had a great experience. I got started because I had a really bad experience. Nobody really sat down and walked me through the benefits that we have as veterans, as military, our families. So I wanted to be able to give back and provide that information for people who may need that help or may need that understanding. So we'll kind of get going. Forgot which computer I was on for a second. Oh. I think there we go. Cool. Okay, so these are kind of the topics we're going to cover today. So we're going to go over the home buying process. We're going to talk about the benefits of a VA loan kind of compared to the others. And then the whole goal of this is to kind of empower veterans and military families to be able to use their benefits and maximize those. And then if there's any questions anybody has, we can get that information answered.
Alrighty, so this is basically just a breakthrough of the main 3 mortgage loans that you would go through when purchasing a residential property. So we have, obviously the goal here is we're more VA specialized, but this is a breakthrough of the other 2 as well for civilian folk. So for civilian folk, we would be looking at doing a conventional or an FHA loan. They're really, the differences between them, a borrower would not really have to know. That would be more for me or another loan officer to deep dive on choosing the right program that fits your needs. Typically FHA is for people with like shakier credit, people who might not fit into the conventional box. So really the only main difference between FHA and conventional would be FHA typically has stricter appraisal restrictions, meaning that the property might need to be cleaned up, things to be repaired. We might see that a lot more with an FHA loan compared to conventional. Conventional is really the same. It's still just a residential mortgage loan for folks to get into homes. There is a lot looser restrictions on the appraisal. For restrictions, typically if there are repairs needed, we can still close. But it just depends on the property as well. VA is more often than not the cheapest loan program for a borrower, which is if you are VA eligible, that's typically going to be the route we're going to go to minimize your cash to close as well as your overall monthly payment. That's what we really want for our veterans and our active duty folks. Really the main differences here between VA and FHA or conventional would be mortgage insurance. There is no mortgage insurance with a VA loan. There are for FHA and conventional. How much you're financing in that mortgage insurance is really depending on how much you're putting down as the borrower. So, there's a lot more nuance to that, but there's not that much time to go over that stuff. VA definitely has lower interest rates. There's no mortgage insurance, and there's no money required for a down payment, which is probably the biggest, one of the biggest benefits to our borrowers. So We'll go over closing costs and stuff like that later, but the fact that we don't have to bring any money for a down payment is really nice. The VA loan program is for active duty folks, surviving spouses, as well as our veterans as well. National Guard and Reservists as well also have this benefit, so long as they meet the time eligibility requirements. So.
Yeah, so the biggest thing that I want to highlight here is the 0% down. So as somebody who, as an A1C, as a senior airman, your BAH really isn't all that much compared to as you start making rank and as you start going up. So being able to not have money saved and be able to get into a home, begin building wealth, begin, investing in properties and setting yourself up for the future, those are the largest things that I feel like are a benefit. When I bought my first home using a VA loan, I bought it for right around like 180 grand, sold it 6 months later for 230, which isn't normal to be able to sell something that quick, but being able to have nothing down, I didn't come out of pocket at all. And it ended up putting me on the right path to being able to own more homes in the future. Go ahead and click over. So Wyatt kind of touched on this briefly. So who's qualified for a VA loan? So anybody that's active duty and has been in for 90 days or longer, any veterans who meet the minimum service requirements, National Guard and Reserve, certain surviving spouses. So if your spouse were to die, if they're a veteran and they have a high enough disability rating or service connected disabilities, then you would qualify to still be able to use those VA benefits. And same thing, if your spouse were to die on active duty, you would also retain those benefits. And then same thing, kind of like what I just said, honorably discharged veterans who are able to get a certificate of eligibility. What is a certificate of eligibility? It's essentially a fancy letter from the VA that says, you served your time, you were honorably discharged, and that you're fully qualified for whatever those benefits are. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the certificate of eligibility is something I would grab from the VA right away upon application. We either pretty much get it right away or we don't. If we don't get it right away, it doesn't mean you're not qualified. We just might need to grab your DD 214, your discharge papers, or your retirement point statements if that's eligible, or if that's applicable to you if you're a reservist or National Guard. Something else that the certificate of eligibility shows us is how much entitlement you have. Entitlement is basically just the amount of loan you are able to take out as a borrower, as an eligible VA party. So you're basically given so much, a veteran is given so much that they can take out for their loan benefit up to 100% financing. With this entitlement, that means you can have several VA loans going at the same time. Just depends on how much entitlement you have as the veteran and how much you have used in your properties. Again, that's something I would work with, if for second use or multiple use for VA homes, that's something I would look at with a borrower and go, hey, you've used 2 VA loans now, you have this much entitlement left. Here's how much you can finance up to 100% financing or no money down payment.
Okay, so the biggest benefits to having a VA loan is you're able to get into a home sooner, right? You don't have to save the 3.5% to 5% to 20% down for a FHA, a conventional loan. You're not going to have those PMIs, private mortgage insurance. The rates are going to be lower. This is all stuff that we've already kind of talked about. Some of the bigger things, though, that people might not really realize are the closing costs are going to be lower. And then you're also going to have another set of support team through the VA that's there to help you maximize your benefits and that you can reach out to with questions, or if you just need a third opinion, or you need somebody to help you with it as all. Like I said, for me, my experience being able to use these benefits, right? I didn't have a loan officer that really wanted, or that didn't explain things to me very well. I didn't have a great real estate agent that wanted to sit down and walk me through the steps, the information. I never got any sort of a class like this that I was ever able to go to that explained all of this information. So it made me more comfortable. It made my wife a lot more comfortable. And then as we started, especially once we started PCSing from state to state, and we were traveling, thousands of miles to get from one place to another, having that support system and better understanding it now, it makes a huge difference. So then being able to make connections at the next base as well to get connected with people also helps build that, that sphere of just support and information.
Great, yeah, I think, as far as VA loans goes, Casey hit on a lot of great points here. Really the big thing would be, understanding that there is no money required for a down payment, for most cases. However, closing costs are a big factor of cash to close. Somebody has to pay the closing costs at the end of the day. It's between you or the seller. This is a big part of the negotiation is mostly just figuring out who's gonna pay the closing costs, as well as other things regarding the property, but for our borrowers, for home buyers specifically, closing costs are going to be one of the biggest topics, one of the biggest things we need to touch on right away. Figuring out that can really be the difference between needing several $1,000s for the home buyer for closing, even though there is no money required for down payment, and possibly nothing. Our VA buyers can pay nothing at closing sometimes, or even get a check back at closing. They can get money through purchasing homes in some cases, but I think closing costs are probably the biggest thing that we need to double touch on with a borrower, at least.
Yeah, so we'll do a deeper dive into the closing costs as we get going through this. So I don't want to call it a negative, but there is a piece of using the VA loan for active duty that is really important to know, which is called the funding fee. So as a veteran you're getting these benefits up front, but the VA tax on what they call a funding fee to help pay for those costs. Some of those exemptions are if you're a veteran with a service-connected disability, right? So just about every active duty member got hurt in some way, or they sprained an ankle at PT, or they have tinnitus now or whatever. All of those that are service-connected will get you exempted from this. So on each one of my houses I bought while I was still active duty, I was paying this 1 to 3% fee essentially tacked onto the loan. So I might have bought the house for $200,000, but my loan was actually for 220, 225, something along those lines, because of those additional fees that get added onto it. However, once you get out, if you're a surviving spouse, you don't have to pay for those too. So I'll let Wyatt touch on the funding fee a little bit more on how that looks on the loan side.
Yeah, really, I think the big thing here would be just how much we're actually able to finance into this. So the VA sets for people who do not receive a VA disability income or have a rating of some sort, you're going to be tacked on with, for your first time use, it will be 1.25% for your first time use. So if you're buying your first home using your VA benefit, you're just going to get 1.25% of the loan amount tacked on top of that loan. That money is paid over the life of the loan. That money goes towards the VA to keep this program running. For subsequent use, we are going to see that 3.3. So after you bought your first home, you're buying a second VA property, you're going to get 3.3% finance instead of 1.25. You can drop the 3.3 with down payment thresholds. So there's a threshold so this would be like 0%. It gets cut in half basically if you're putting down more than 5%, and then it goes down a little bit more if you're putting down more than 10%. So it can be as high as 3.3 for subsequent use, but can also be much lower than that for if you're bringing a down payment as well. So
okay, cool. So we're gonna kind of start getting into some of the steps of actually buying the home. We're going to do an overview eventually covering the actual steps in the home buying process. But some things that are different with a VA loan versus a conventional is that there is an appraisal that's required from the VA. So what the purpose of that is it goes through and it confirms that you're not overbuying a house. This could have been a bigger thing like during COVID when houses were selling super, super fast and people were offering, 10, 20, 30% over asking price because everything was going so fast and everybody was trying to get into a house. So let's say you're going through and you're going to buy a home that's, $200,000. But then the appraisal comes in, they look at it, they look at everything in the neighborhood and they decide that it's not worth that much, right? And the VA or the appraisal comes back and says it's only worth 190. Then the VA isn't going to be able to fund it all the way up to the 200,000, which would then require you and your agent to go back to the negotiating table to have another conversation about how is this going to look? Do we have $10,000 to come out of pocket and meet it? Are we going to require them to lower their price? And it's all part of just that negotiating process once you're actually under contract or working through a contract. And on top of that, there's also a VA home inspection piece that is done by the appraiser, the VA appraiser. And what they're doing is they're looking for safety concerns, right? Is there peeling paint? Is there a large drop? Is there concrete that's settled and it's a tripping hazard? They're looking for those things because they're trying to protect the homeowner, the VA buyer, the future homeowner, to make sure that they're not going to be further harmed by purchasing this, right? That comes back to that VA sphere of support, okay? So a full home inspection is not required, but I always recommend it. I'm sure everybody on my team would fully recommend it, because what that does is it allows you to get into the home and have somebody that's an expert in some of these fields take a look and see what exactly it is that's going on. They're going to look at the roof. They might look at the plumbing, the HVAC. They're going to look at the concrete for cracks, the basement. Is there leaking water? Is there mold? Are there termites? Things that are going to cost you money down the road if you don't have it done early on and you're not able to identify those items. And right there at the bottom, right, helps avoid costly surprises. So these are some of the things that, you know, you want to have done. And then when you do actually get that home inspection report back, you want to make sure that you read through it, or your agent reads through it very well. So when I bought my first home in Nebraska, the day we moved in, we had just PCS from Arizona. You know, I had been in the car for like 35 hours with my dogs and my family. We get up here and we get into the house. It's the middle of December and my HVAC won't turn on, my hot water won't turn on, and my basement's flooding. All because we didn't read the home inspection well enough. And we didn't realize, hey, they didn't actually look at this portion of the plumbing because they noticed it was leaking and they didn't want to further damage the house. They didn't check the HVAC because it was turned off at the fuse box. They didn't check the hot water heater for the same reason. It was a vacant home, right? I didn't know any better. My agent should have known better. And so here I am with kids in, like I said, it was December 15th when I got here. Snow was on the ground. And we can't take a warm shower. We can't get the HVAC to turn on. And it was a nightmare. So stuff like that is important and it does happen. So that's why I always will recommend a home inspection. And I will always very diligently go through it and request somebody to go back out and look at something again if they didn't do it properly the first time. So, you tell me why.
Yeah, I'll just touch on this really quick as well, just briefly. Yeah, so the appraisal is required for both conventional and VA. VA just has a little bit stricter guidelines because we want to make sure our active duty and our veterans are getting into a home that's basically safe, sanitary, and move-in ready. That's really all they're doing here with the VA minimum property requirements. That's all they're just making sure of. They're not going into, you know, like he pointed out, the fuse box. I mean, they're going to take a look at it, but they're not going to deep dive on it like a home inspector would. It's not required to get a home inspection separate. We have to get an appraiser no matter what, because we want to make sure, again, the house is at value or above even in some cases. So yeah, while it's not required, it's definitely highly recommended, because the home inspector, what they're going to do, they're not determining the value of the property. They're basically like a professional mechanic looking under the hood of your car to make sure that, you know, like he said, that there are no costly surprises. They're making sure you're not truthfully buying a lemon. You know, that's the best way to, I think, compare it to would be that, because, you know, sewer, especially like stuff in the sewer, like a home can look great, but you know, sewer lines, water lines, all that stuff like that can be tens of thousands of dollars, and really a home inspector is going to go into that stuff and see that for you and see that all that is good to go. So
okay, so we kind of alluded to it once, talking about the VA closing costs. So I'll let Wyatt cover the biggest things that we're going to see at the closing table.
Yeah, so closing costs, the biggest thing is they're mostly comprised of just making sure title, taxes, and insurance are paid at closing. There's basically two different categories of closing costs. There's like borrower specific, and then there's kind of home specific or county specific. So the home specific one would be like, or the borrower specific set of closing costs would be for like your down payment. If you're buying down interest rate points, if we are getting a home inspection, etc., like home warranty, all that stuff, etc. And then there's the property specific stuff, which I touched on, is mostly to just make sure title, taxes, and insurance are paid at the closing table. So we kind of break it down here a little bit. This is mostly that, and then the origination fee, that's basically for lenders. what we're charging for your home loan to do your home loan. So typically across the industry, we'll see 1% of your loan amount, not the purchase price. So we'll see 1% of that. That's money the borrower would pay at closing. So 1% is pretty much standard. Ours is $895 flat fee at Veterans United at our local branch in Bellevue. So that is basically the difference there. And then let's see here. So closing costs, I did touch on this briefly earlier, but somebody has to pay them at the closing table. This is negotiable with the seller of the property. As the home buyer, we can definitely look at negotiating with them on who's going to pay that. Now, again, somebody has to pay them. Closing costs typically are the golden rule for just quoting somebody in general would be about 3% of the loan. So we're looking to, if you're purchasing a $300,000 home, estimate that the closing costs are going to be about $9,000. So how we necessarily negotiate that with the seller would be kind of, how good we are at negotiating, how strong our offer is, et cetera. But that is something absolutely the seller could pay up to and including 100% seller paid closing costs. So that way our borrower is keeping as much money in their pocket through this transaction as possible. For some folks, that $9,000 can go a long way towards buying down a rate, putting money as a down payment. You can pay off the funding fee with that money as well. So definitely a lot of ways we can maximize your money through this transaction. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The last part that I'll touch on here would be some lenders offer closing cost assistance. For I work with a local lender, so we're able to do for Nebraska and Iowa specifically, we're able to use the NIFA and IFA programs. Simplistically, there's several programs within both. They're pretty much the same programs, but of their programs, they have closing costs and down payment assistance programs within them for eligible borrowers. So that's not necessarily something we can do directly, but it's something we can do through NIFA or IFA respectively for Nebraska or Iowa. So.
Yeah, so the biggest thing I'm going to go back to here, right, is the seller's able to contribute that money toward the closing costs. So again, right, we're talking about no money down to be able to buy a house, right? If you're somebody that's lower rank, you don't have enough savings, you're new to the military, you might already have a family, but you still need to get into a home and you don't want to rent a house, rent an apartment, live in base housing, whatever it might be. So what you can do is you can actually have the seller cover those closing costs. And as your agent, right, it's my goal to try and get you into the best situation possible at the negotiating table. So me personally, I've never paid closing costs on one of the houses that I've bought. I've always found a way to get it worked into the deal. There's been a couple times where I've offered a little bit higher than the asking price. My house that I bought when I was in Arizona, I think they had it listed at like 175, and we offered them 185 or 190. I'm not sure, I don't remember. But then I said, okay, but I want you guys to take 3% to cover closing costs because I knew that would be enough to cover all of the closing costs. And then essentially anything over that they got to keep as extra profit on themselves. So I didn't have to come out of pocket for anything. I was able to go in, sign all my documents at closing, get my keys and go home. Right. There was no money and I was a brand new A1C, newly married, fresh kids. I didn't have any money saved up, or I didn't have the opportunity, especially for somebody that was 19. I went for a year of college, but I was in college. I wasn't working full time. So that was important for me to be able to get into a home and start building that wealth, start building an investment for the future, which has ultimately led me to be able to be where I am now.
Yeah, and over asking for a home is typically the process for financing closing costs. We can't directly finance them, but offering more for the property, having them cover it is functionally the same as doing that. So definitely a good point.
Okay, so now we're going to go in and we're going to go over the home buying process. Kind of the step-by-step of this. This is a real fancy document that Shelly was able to put together. With some typos. We're not going to talk about those though. We're just going to focus on it, right? So my team is hanging out behind us. We'll have a picture at the end that shows all their information. If you have something specific, they have their own areas of expertise that they like to focus in on, but we'll talk about that later. All right, so we'll run through this, and then the next screen is essentially the exact same thing, just more broken out with a little bit more information, right? So at the very beginning of your home buying process, you're going to go through and you're going to meet your agent. I always recommend interviewing agents, going through and asking questions, figuring out what their values are, figuring out how responsive they are, their experience, their niche, right? Obviously, I like to focus in on VA, just because it's my background and it's where I come from and trying to provide back. So if you're an investor, you know, there's gonna be agents that specifically want to do investment properties, investment portfolio, helping people find different ways to do that. So I would always send them over to Tony, just because I know that that's what that's his thing. I'll just say it that way. Right, so I would always recommend doing that, seeing what your agent is able to offer you. Right, so there's some new things, as part of the National Association of Realtors, lawsuit that happened, late last year. So before you're able to go out and see any properties, you have to fill out a buyer's agency, disclosure, which is gonna go through and it's gonna show essentially what my job is as your agent. It's going to show my responsibilities. It's going to show who my leadership is. So if you feel like I'm not doing a good job, you can go tell on me and you can get them to make sure I'm doing my job right. Or if you need a new agent, you can go to them and you can get their help in moving you over to somebody else. So it helps you be protected and understand what your benefits are, with working with us. And then you're also going to have a buyer's agency compensation, which essentially says this is how much I'm charging for my services. And if we're not able to negotiate it into the deal, you then are going to be responsible for paying those costs. Again, my job as your real estate agent is to negotiate those items for you and try and get those included as part of the deal. But that's what the agreement was as part of that settlement, is that was what the outcome is, right? Right, then you're going to work with Wyatt here, and you're going to get yourself a pre-approval letter. Just missing a letter. Sorry.
I know.
Just gotta put
I
one.
did fix it, and you just don't have the right one.
Oh, okay, it's my fault. Got it. Cool.
No,
All
I
right.
used to listen to it, sorry.
So, as soon as you get your pre-approval letter, after you've signed your agency, you're gonna be able to go out and start looking at homes. While you're looking at homes, you're gonna be dialing in what your priorities are. What are your wants? What are your needs? What are your must-haves? What are the things that you need for your family, for your kids, for your spouse? Any of those things. Then actually comes the fun part for me, which is writing the offer, negotiating it, and getting you into the home at the best possible price in the best possible circumstances, right? After you accepted your offer, you're going to do an earnest deposit, which is going to go through, and it's essentially a I'm committed check that says I'm going to buy this house. I want to buy this house, and should I decide of my own volition that I don't want to be here, then I'm going to allow you to keep this money, right? Now, the benefits that we have through the VA is called the VA escape clause. So if for whatever reason we're not able to get financing, or the house doesn't pass the appraisal or their home inspection, their little safety inspection that they do, we're able to withdraw our offer and cancel the agreement and still get that money back, which is just another added benefit that the military is able to get. Once all of that is said and done, we're under contract. We're going to go through the home inspection, the loan process, which is what Wyatt would be taking care of. He'd be working with you throughout the process, filling out all the paperwork, making sure everything's moving smoothly. Then we're going to go through that appraisal that we talked about before. Title the whole time is going to be involved, reaching out, requesting documents, requesting information. You're probably going to have to provide your LES, your W-2, your tax forms, just different documents like that showing whether you're married, how much money you make, everything that goes along those lines. As all of that's going on, we're also going to be prepping you for the move. So we're going to be helping you find a moving company if you're going to hire one, helping you get connected with the U-Haul if you're going to move yourself. But it's also getting the small things set up, right? Like trash, water, electricity, making sure all those things are getting transferred over into your name, that they're ready to start on time. It's the little things like that you don't think about until you're actually there, because if you're renting or you're in an apartment, a lot of that stuff's taken care of for you, so you don't have to worry about it. But as a homeowner, these are the things that, like I said, you don't think about until it's time to go turn on the hot water and it's not working because you've never turned on your electricity, right? So all that stuff is going to be happening around this time. The next thing is going to be the final loan approval, and all those documents are going to be getting sent out for signature by both sides. You're also going to be working with your homeowner's insurance. If you're going to use your car company or your car insurance company, obviously a lot of insurance companies offer bundling discounts anymore. So if you keep everything under the same policy, you make a little extra money. And then once all that process is done, you're gonna sit down at the closing table, you're gonna sign like probably 3,000 pages worth of documents, it feels like. And then you're gonna get the keys to your new home, or in my case, I've always gotten garage door openers, I've never been handed keys. So I don't know if that was just because it's been my experience or what, but I've never gotten keys, I've always gotten a garage door opener, so.
You feel like a celebrity on closing day because you write your signature so many times.
Okay, we'll skip over to the next page. This is just another more broken out version, right? So, right, you're meeting with your agent, you're discussing goals and timelines, you're gonna sign all of your documentation that I talked about, get pre-approved, you're gonna start looking at homes. You're gonna set your priorities, schedule your home inspection. You're gonna start the loan processing. You'll have already started this a little bit sooner, but this is where things really start getting into the nitty-gritty of your property tax and your location, excuse me, all of that stuff. Title work's going on in the background, hopefully getting finalized. You're gonna start making your plans to move, sign all your loan documents. You're gonna go in for closing day, and then you're gonna be ready to move into your new home. All right. So what to expect at closing, right? A couple days before your closing date, you're actually gonna do a final property walkthrough, and you're gonna go through and you're gonna be looking for holes in the wall. If you ask for the appliances, if the appliances are missing, you're looking for all of those things. If the roof started leaking and they didn't disclose that to you, that's your chance to like find those things and be able to get those things adjudicated before getting further into the actual buying process. Is it 3 or 5 days that you have to get your closing document, your final?
3 days.
It's 3 days?
Yeah.
Okay, so 3 days prior to closing, you have to receive your final closing costs and your final closing statement, which is gonna have your payment information on it. Okay, you have to receive that 72 hours in advance of closing, and if you don't, you can't close. So if you're supposed to close on a Tuesday and it's Monday and you still haven't gotten it, you're probably not closing, or you're not gonna close on Tuesday, right? So that's very important for the loan officer and for the real estate agent to stay on top of that to make sure that everything's moving along and that you get that information. At the closing table, like we said, there's gonna be 1,000,000 pages worth of documents you gotta read through and sign. Hopefully you have a good title company that's gonna have somebody sitting there and walking you through it. I've never closed on a house where you didn't, right? Because they're there and I believe they're also the notary that's signing it too. So they're there, right? You're gonna show up with a check if you need to provide those closing costs as part of the deal. I never showed up with a check. I always paid it through EFT before going. So it was never part of it. They always wanted that proof of funds before actually closing. But I've also seen it where you actually show up with a paper check. Again, I've never received keys. I've always gotten a garage door opener. You'll get some sort of a welcome packet from your real estate agent that's like a welcome home or something along those lines, giving you some tips. If you're looking for anything to have done, right? These are things that like the personal aspect that you're going to get from a real estate agent where, you're saying, I really love this house, but I already know the work I'm going to do. And because I want to do this and I want to do this and it's going to be great. And so maybe they give you something to help you get that stuff moving a little bit faster. And then after you sign everything, the title company is actually going to go through and they're going to get everything recorded with the county, finalize all the paperwork, get everything submitted. And it's going to actually update in the county treasurer's office that you now own that property. So I'm gonna let Wyatt talk about this for the most part. I'm gonna cover I'm gonna let him talk about what it is, and then I'm gonna cover my experience with it.
Yeah, so this is a state-specific exemption for not just disabled veterans. However, they do use, I would say the majority of our disabled veterans do use this compared to the other folks that do qualify. So all this homestead exemption would be just property tax relief. So it's for eligible parties. So the biggest one that we'll see would be 100% service-connected disabled veterans. So what this exemption is basically property tax, like I said, property tax relief, but it's when it kicks in. So there's a process for specifically Nebraska on when this will be taken into effect and who qualifies. So obviously the first qualifier would be that you are either 100% service-connected veteran, you are a surviving spouse of a veteran who passed away, and you have your own VA benefits at that point. There's also an exemption for elderly folks as well in the state of Nebraska. So what this basically is once you close on the home, if you are an eligible party, you're able to file for this exemption on January 1 of the next year after you close. So if we close today on April 20, was it this 26th? We wouldn't be eligible to file, if you are an eligible party, you wouldn't be eligible to apply for the exemption until January 1 of the following year. So that's the second qualifier would be that. Application process runs from February until June 30th. So you have basically a couple months windows there to file with the county for your homestead exemption. That homestead exemption kicks in January 1 of the following year after you apply. So after you apply and get approved, that's when you'll stop paying property taxes. So if we close today on April 26th, you wouldn't be eligible to apply for the exemption until January 1, 2026, in that February to June timeframe. And then you would no longer be paying property taxes January 1, 2027 forever, so long as you occupy the property. So that's basically this process would be one, you have to be a pre-qualifying eligible member, and then the second qualifier would be you have to be homeowner of record January 1.
Yeah, so I meet this exemption. I did when I was working on the C-130s, I was part of the combat search and rescue unit. Got to be a part of 3 real world rescues, ocean rescues. And we did a lot of cool things. But my body took a beating, and I ended up with 100% once I got out. So part of that now is that I have to go through and I have to apply for this. So in March, so just a month ago, is when I hit my 1 year of being out. I still haven't gotten this put into place, but I've already applied for it, right? So starting in January is when it'll kick in. So the only thing that I want to add to is that you also have to own the home 1 January through August 15th. You have to own it at some point in that time. So if you bought it on the 14th of August, 1 January, you're going to be able to be eligible and apply. If you bought it on the 16th, you're not eligible because you didn't own the home in the qualifying period. So that's an important piece to it too. So even you can own the home when you're active duty or, prior to applying, and that's perfectly fine. You just have to own it at some point in that period, the year prior. And it's only possible for your primary residence. You can't use it on any investment properties, secondary homes, anything like that. So that's also important.
Only use on one property at a time.
Yeah.
Too.
So the biggest benefit that I have for me is that as I'm looking at my bills and I'm looking at my, my financial situation, I'm cutting almost $700 off of my mortgage payment by not having to pay property tax. If you're somebody that lives down in Papillion, which has a very high tax rate, depending on the cost of your house, you could be saving, $1,000 a month almost on whatever your mortgage is. Which might qualify you to be able to buy a bigger, nicer house, or if that's what you need, right? Because that $1,000 makes a huge difference on how much you're paying and how much you're able to afford each month. I've got several friends that are in the middle of their application or they've applied in the past. The nice thing is once you've got this exemption, you only have to refile every 5 years, and all it is reconfirming that you still have the tax exemption, or that you still have the qualifying service-connected disability rating. So on years that end in 5 and 0 is when you would actually pay or submit that information. It's no cost to apply. You just send them in the letter that the VA gives you. It's super easy to get. It's right on the website under your profile to be able to just print it off and send it in. It's a really easy process. And then in October is when you get your approval. And they'll send you a letter that says, starting 1 January, you're no longer required to pay your property tax. And you submit that to your mortgage company, and they'll go through and they'll stop adding that to your escrow payment or your escrow payment. So, okay, let's go on to the next.
Good. So this would be some of the biggest benefits of working with a local loan officer or mortgage company. Really, I guess this can be boiled down to the fact that local, we're local, so our reputation really is the only thing we have to work with. So you're going to see often, and not just with my company, me or my company, but you'll see this across the industry with local loan officers. You'll see quicker response times. You'll see more communication. Sellers and Realtors prefer to work locally because they know we're there, they know we'll pick up the phone for you. They know we work nights and weekends as well, so that's part of the biggest benefit. And then secondly would be for specifically Nebraska, Iowa, we can do NIFA and IFA, the closing costs and down payment assistance programs. We can do those because we are local in the Bellevue, Omaha area. So we like to have just pretty much open communication with you. You're aware of every step of the process from what documents we need for pre-approval, if we can go right away, or if we need to possibly wait a couple months. You know, once we're under contract, I'll keep you updated on when you're sent over to underwriting, when the appraisal is ordered, when we get the appraisal back, what its value is. If there's repairs needed, we jump on that right away. I think that's what separates us from, you know, out-of-state folks or just non-local people in general. You'll typically see that kind of, I guess, possibly an elevated customer service experience working locally compared to, you know, non-local or out-of-state. So.
Cool, so that's all that we have as far as information to provide. I know it's kind of a long PowerPoint. I hate death by PowerPoint, but sometimes that's the best way to get information across. Does anybody online have any questions or any situations they want to talk about or bring up as a way to get some more information? Anybody in the room have any questions?
No, just, I can share a couple of stories.
Okay.
Okay,
You gonna come up front?
I will come up.
All right,
just
Shelley's
for-
got-
Just for a second.
Shelley's got to
Let's get
introduce
this
herself.
wrapped up. Hello, I'm Shelley. I'm one of the realtors with Real Estate One Group. And the biggest thing that I think when I work with a veteran is they really believe that the VA loan is a home inspection, and it is not. So if you guys can just wrap your head around that it's not, they're gonna look for major material defects, right? They're gonna look at the lifespan of the roof, or if they see a structural issue, they're going to point it out. But they're not gonna physically get up on the roof. They are going to take the panel off the electrical box, and they're gonna look for double tapping. They're gonna look for knob and tube wiring. They're gonna call those things out. But that's not their expertise. And also on the home inspection side, your home inspector is not a licensed electrician. They'll call things out. So make sure that you align yourself with a realtor that understands those things. And then I wanted to go ahead and also second what Wyatt said. Using a local lender is key because they're the ones that have access to our on the boots ground appraisers, and chances are they've already been through the house at some other point, and so they do have a higher fiduciary responsibility working to look at your best interests at those properties. So those are the key things that I just wanted to point out. And Casey is now officially, you've gone through the MRP training program, so he knows every aspect of what it's going to take for you to get the house and the loan. Lastly, your loan dictates what type of house that you can buy. Not all houses qualify for VA, all right? So Casey is trained along with Demaya and Tony, myself. We can look at that house in advance and tell you if it's going to be qualified. Now, keep in mind, Casey's been talking about we can negotiate, you know, the seller paying your closing costs, seller paying for the buyer agent commission. That is not always true, okay? And when I say that it's not always true, I'm saying in a hot market, all right, and you guys are going in and you're looking at these houses and there's going to be 10 or 15 offers that are coming in, it's going to be tricky to ask the seller to pay for everything. So align yourself with, you know, Casey or any of these agents, so then they can at least set expectations up front, so you're not disheartened and you've already fallen in love with the house and you're not able to get it because, you know, the seller can pay for those closing costs. If you are a buyer, okay, that really needs all of those things paid for, honestly, the best time to be shopping is during the holiday, okay? So what are holidays? 4th of July, Memorial Day weekend, Christmas, Thanksgiving,
Yeah.
or when the snow is flying, because that's when our sellers are most motivated. Now, I'm not telling you how to go do your job to buy a house, but that's typically when we can go ahead and get the most things for you in your transaction. So with that, happy home selling. We're so grateful that you guys were able to jump on with Casey and Wyatt. Wyatt, thank you so much for coming down here today and being a part of this webinar. So with that, I'll let you guys wrap things up.
Yep. So, just a little thank you for here at the end, thanks for your time, thank you for your service. If you guys want to set up a one-on-one, consultation to go over anything that's unique to you, or anything that you, anything that you have that you don't want to share in front of the group, or you don't want to ask in front of the group, let myself know, let Wyatt know, and we'll get that set up. Here's all of Wyatt's information. It's a little bit blurry. I couldn't fix the resolution, but I still think it looks all right. So, you need to give him a phone call, or send him an email. Here's his information, or he's local, he's down in Bellevue. So you can always stop by and come and pick his brain.
This is my cell number too, so you can text me too if you don't want to call. Just, some people like texting.
And then here's us, here's our team with Real Estate One Group. Shelly already came up and introduced herself. Tony and Shelly are both licensed in Nebraska and Iowa. So if you guys are looking over across the river, you can do that. Tony, what was this award for?
That's the Halloween contest.
Oh, it was a Halloween contest.
The neighborhood Halloween contest.
All right. Make sure all in favor.
Still running.
Myself and then Demaya's here too. If you're looking for anything, you're more than welcome to reach out to her as well. Yeah. So that's all that I have. I'll stop the recording, and if anybody online wants to ask anything or wants to come off, we can have any more conversation.